And then you hit that point where you've, mid-20s, and you think, well, what else can I do? Suddenly that uncertainty of not knowing what's happening next is quite an exciting prospect.
This is A Little Life.
Everyone feels a lack of inspiration at times. Sometimes a bit overwhelmed and feeling like we're going through life on autopilot. Taking that next step is always scary. This show is meant to be a practical guide for anyone listening, no matter what stage of life they're in. Each episode, I speak with a different guest who is building a meaningful life for themselves in different parts of the world. Whether it's addressing social issues through hip hop music in India, spreading awareness about endangered animals on an island in the Pacific Ocean, to tackling invisible illnesses through the help of technology, or making couture fashion from old newspapers, we discuss career choices, personal growth, and doing some good with the time that we have. After all, it's only a little life. My name is Aniket, and I work in the music industry at a company called Outdustry. We specialize in the India and China music markets, and we're working towards building a fair and rewarding ecosystem for creators who give us awesome music to listen to. Before Outdustry, I was working in the fintech space in London for a company called Accenture, and I focused on digital payments. In 2018, I decided to take what I had learned and apply it to something that I cared deeply about, which is music. And I ended up moving back home to India and haven't looked back since.
Okay, I'm speaking with Ben Howitt. He's a wildlife conservationist and an old friend of mine. And this is part two of my conversation with Ben. So if you haven't heard part one, I'd recommend you go back and check it out for context. This episode contains what I hope to present as the message of this podcast experiment, which is to take a risk and chase something that you care about. How you can take what you already know and figure out the next part of your journey. And through conversations with people like Ben, I hope to demystify different careers and show everyone that anyone can do what they love without romanticizing, without downplaying how scary and how difficult making those decisions can be. So, without further ado, I give you Ben Howitt, Part 2. I hope you enjoy.
What was it like post the outbreak? What happened next?
So I actually left just as it was tailing off.
Okay.
So the clinic itself, which was run by an American sort of charity, they were closing it at the end of the year due to funding issues and the likes.
The entire clinic was shutting down.
The shutting down, which was devastating, as you know, for all, but it was a decision that had to be made, which is fair. And because I was that manager on the ground at that time, I was in a position with a couple of colleagues and a fantastic sort of local foundation who asked me to say, look, can we restart this? And so I actually left the Galapagos to come back to the UK to start this. So I'm in the process of having my own charity foundation being set up with the Galapagos project as its primary project. And it's managed by two foundations. It's going to be a local oriented program with a lot more local involvement. And we're going to try and to build a clinic partnered with education. So that's why I'm back in the UK. And I think why I had such a drive to do that was probably because of this distemper outbreak. I felt I had unfinished business out there, because I wanted to try and go back and have a responsibility to make sure that thing didn't happen again. And I love the islands because they're beautiful and they're fantastic. So don't get me wrong. Listen. So I'm starting up this project here, ready to go and reopen hopefully the clinic in September, providing everything else situation runs.
Yeah, shit. That's incredible, man. So I've seen on Facebook and Instagram when you were back in the UK, like you said, you were doing these lectures across unis, and this is spreading the message of the clinic and kind of raising awareness for your upcoming charity.
Absolutely.
Recruiting as well.
It's going to be voluntary based, so we're trying to get the universities and the students to get enthused about projects abroad, and so it's trying to encourage them and say, look, come out to these environments, and experience something beyond what you're taught in the UK.
Yeah.
And it'll give you a good standing for when you go back to the UK. You've broadened your spectrum of the profession. So that's the idea.
Insane. Okay. And now we get to my favorite bit, which is your rickshaw ride.
To give a background to it, I have a good friend called Will, who's a vet as well. He graduated with me. And he came out to the Galapagos to see me for 6 weeks. He came to volunteer at the clinic, and we had a great time. And one evening we had a substantial amount of beers. There's a local brewery there. And we said, well, what should we do next? And within 2 days, we'd signed up to the rickshaw run. And the whole idea was to take 14 days to get from Jaisalmer down to Coach in a rickshaw. One of your type 1 rickshaws, none of these fancy stuff you have nowadays. We then said, well, let's do it. And what we decided to do was to raise money for the upcoming project back in the Galapagos. So our rickshaw was painted with our project Galapagos Animal Doctors. And we wanted to film it and make a fun thing on it and what we got up to. And it was 14 days, and we did 3,500 kilometers in this rickshaw.
I'm just picturing 2 white dudes who say, yeah, let's drive a rickshaw from Jaisalmer to Kochi. So I wouldn't drive that in a car if you paid me. What?
It was absolutely insane. I'll be honest with you. I love India, and the people are hilarious because they are exactly the same mindset. You see two mid-20s Caucasians going through the weirdest parts and the real parts of India, and they all love it. They were really, really friendly. We had a great time. But it was, our big breakdown was on the edge of Mount Abu. I think it's north Ahmedabad, isn't it? We decided to drive up Mount Abu at the end of the evening with a couple of other rickshaws, and our drive shaft snapped halfway up.
Yeah. And this was day 2 or day 3?
Day 2 into the journey. And we were halfway up the mountain, so we had to pull over. And of course, we had no idea what to do. We had no way we were going to fix that on our own. And so suddenly there's 2 guys on a motorbike came down Abu and said, we have a friend who knows what he's talking about. And so he took my friend Will on the back of their motorbike, the 3 on a motorbike down the mountain. And we didn't actually realize that these 2 guys were completely drunk. So we lost a little bit of money there, but that's fine. They took Will to a garage. The garage guys drove all the way up. They took the drive shaft out, went all the way back down the mountain, welded it, came all the way back up the mountain, fitted it, and this was at the pitch black. And so we managed to get it going, and we drove up the rest of the mountain, about 12 midnight at night, and we didn't lose a day. It was a fantastic. These guys were amazing. I'm so impressed. They, but I think the focus was it was an adventure for the individual for us to just go out and experience India. Will hadn't been to India before, so it was fantastic. Yeah, it was immersing himself straight into it, wasn't it? He hadn't been to India before, so he absolutely loved it. And I think the idea of raising money for it is a secondary. A lot of it is just to go out on a stupid adventure, get out of your bubble, and figure it out.
Wow. You must have experienced India in a way like very few Indians themselves would have.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't know what the average, but it was. Well, I think one of the biggest lessons I learned from it was that, Indian roads are chaos, but it's organized chaos. If we were going down one of a mountain sort of curve, and on a blind corner, you'd have coming the other way, you'd have a motorbike being overtaken by a bus, being overtaken by a car. So this, it was the nerves were high, but somehow the traffic works. It just blows our mind from Europe, because if we had any sort of car out of place, everybody would just crash. We're too focused on guidelines. Or India just knows how to do chaos right, and it's just such a pleasure to watch. But from our environment, that is such a difficult thing for us to learn. But yeah, it's amazing.
Amazing. Anything that you remember that you like eating? What favorite food from India?
Always a big palak paneer.
My favorite as well.
Yeah, it goes down whatever environment you're in. It's the nicest. But yeah, it was an absolute eye opener in terms of all the different environments go through India, the different people. Even going into Kerala.
Yeah.
It's so you'd start off with, obviously around Ahmedabad and Rajasthan, there's a lot of open space, and the villages are very much pockets, so you have a big gap between them. And then you enter Kerala, and it's just suburbia the entire way, isn't it? It's really interesting. There was no open space that we could find. It was so fascinating to see everything.
So you drove down on the eastern side of the Ghats, right? Once you came down, because I remember getting in touch with you while you were still in Rajasthan and Gujarat and asking you, what's your route going to be? Are you going to be coming close to Bombay? Whether I'm going to be able to see you at any point? But it was always like, bro, I don't know where I'm going to be. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I'm just going to let you know.
We just thought we'd do it day by day. We'll have an end goal and figure it out as we go along. I think we try to avoid the big cities because it's just a nightmare in a little rickshaw.
So now, where are you at now in life, career-wise, plans, etc.?
So I'm now trying to earn some money. Going back to the bare basics. Spending a year or less than a year in the Galapagos and then setting up your own charity means that you are financially committing to a project that won't get you any income.
Mm-hmm.
So that was I've always had a comfortable, stable job and all this. So then just being in an environment where I had to find it was a good learning curve. So I'm doing sort of locum work, shift work as a vet.
How do you deal with that? How do you think about it? How do you conceptualize it? How do you kind of position that in your own mind?
Money's never been the focus of what I've done, and I don't think it ever will be. But you still need to bring something in, no doubt. I think, I do sort of try and plan a month ahead. And what shifts that a lot of places do give you shifts sort of a month ahead, and I say, okay, how much am I going to be bringing in this month by these shifts? And you work around it, and you just have to adjust your lifestyle accordingly. And it doesn't, like everything that's new, it takes a while to just appreciate it and understand it, if you see what I mean. So now that I'm in this position, it's taken me a little bit of time to come to terms with saying, okay, well, finances has to be a focus. But after you get into the rhythm of it, you realize it's, in certain environments, it's not too limiting as long as you prepare well in advance.
Fair. Yeah, I guess that's a good way of thinking about it. Knowing, like, even if it's a seemingly erratic schedule, you've done your bit to plan kind of what your month is going to be like, which is quite a good runway to know what's going to happen. And you need to build that flexibility into your own mind as well of adapting if and when a situation arises. So personally, something that I face trouble regulating is just my kind of discipline, in which case I feel like I'm more of a pendulum. Either I'm too much in control or not at all. Like, there's no in between at all. So I'll be planning not to the minute, but like very heavy planning. I'd be tracking things that I'm doing, whether that's exercise, whether that's, habit formation, for example. Like I was learning Chinese on Duolingo for a bit, religiously every day, tracking that, like, getting the little ding up there, like you've done your 5 minutes. And that itself is almost like a dopamine kick of having achieved that thing. Or it's like I have no control of what I'm doing. And I feel like my external environment, what's going on in my personal life, what's going on in my professional life, all of those things definitely have some sort of like a big role. And sometimes it's just like a release, when that control gets released because it feels too much. Um, and I guess that's a lesson in dealing with overwhelm and kind of understanding my own patterns, because now I've kind of narrowed that down into knowing for me it's a 2 to 3 week cycle of too much and too little control even. So, and that's quite helpful to know, like even the
Yeah.
fact it's the 2 to 3 week cycle, and like giving myself allowances for that is quite beneficial, because I have a habit of being quite hard on myself when I'm not on the ball. And if I know that I'm in that kind of slump period, then I'm teaching myself to be a bit kinder, thinking like I don't have to be at 100% all the time.
Absolutely. And I think what the attraction, for when I hit the sort of my mid-20s, like you say, I mean, everything was set in motion, and a lot of us have, that strict direction, that strict path. You go to school, you go to university, you get your job, and everything's kind of laid out, or in theory laid out. And then you hit that point where you've, mid-20s, and you think, well, what else can I do? Suddenly, that
Huge.
uncertainty of not knowing what's happening next is quite an exciting prospect.
But it's so scary for some people,
Scary.
bro. But like, what if you just don't know? What if you don't know what you want to do? What if you're scared of taking the first step? Like, just knowing yourself, knowing your interests, knowing what keeps you ticking is so important in these times.
Yeah.
And like, I'm talking to you who is doing like this kind of vocational subject, but coming out of the consulting field, which is what I feel is so expanded in people's consciousness right now, is like the services industry. You finish uni and then you go to a job,
Yeah.
whether that's an agency, consulting, banking, finance, startups, whatever that is. It's a job, it's a job profile. And
Yeah.
then 2 years in, which is like the general threshold, everyone's like, okay, I'm ready for my next thing. But that becomes a question of are you going to stay on the conveyor belt, which means that if you've done consulting till now or investment banking, do you then look at venture capital or private equity, which seems to be the standard transition, or you jump into industry, which means like you right now, obviously, everyone wants to work at a startup or a growing company, and understandably, like it's exciting tech enabled industries, but there's so much intention behind that switch as well. Like, how do you make that choice? Which direction you want to go? What you want to chase? What do you think you know about yourself? Even like comes into question, and that kind of stops
Yeah.
people in their tracks.
And it's quite making that first step is the hardest bit. Yeah.
So it's quite interesting to see like how we were talking about the scaling issue of how it's applicable across medicine, how it's applicable across public policy. For example, right now there's a big conversation around that. A similar thing would be to look at the functions that we all do in our own jobs and see how that translates to other work that we do. Because at the end of the day, so much of the work that we do is, let's say, administrative, financial planning, managing people, managing ourselves, our emotions, our doubts. And that all gets baked into the job. Like right now, it's not just a career and then life. Like this whole concept of work-life balance also, now that we're all working at home, is blurring. Like I don't have a start or end time to my day, which I should. I should build in a routine. But all of these things are so daunting. So can you like kind of demystify this for me in terms of, let's say, a person at the cusp of a change of careers right now, or even someone at the end of high school who, hearing everything that you've had to say in this last hour or so, decides that this is something that they might be interested in exploring or knowing more about. Can you kind of break down how this would translate, or let's say outline a path for me to get into your field? Like, do I need to have a background in veterinary science?
Yeah.
How can I kind of conceptualize exploring your world?
I think the put the veterinary aside for a little bit. I mean, I think what I hope to advocate is more the world of conservation instead. And conservation is an aspect and a field that absolutely any person, no matter what their background is, what industry they're in, they are useful. There's always areas in that place where we need skills and experience from different industries. And conservation again is a huge subject. There's NGOs that require people's involvement, whether you're from a consultancy area, an accounting area, or a business area, to the people who are on the ground. Anything, if what I'd say, if you're interested in this area and you have a passion for the environment, the wildlife, travel, exploration, it requires people from every single area up the scale. So for people like me, for example, who want to set up this foundation on the ground, I can't do what I'm doing without people like you. So you may have, say, somebody who's on the ground. You then need the people and the NGO behind it with full administrative powers, people else understanding management, accounting, and then you have the fundraisers, people going out, and the people who are making awareness, going around giving talks. You need education, people who are in the education industry, who know how to implement an education program for people. So as a vet, I mean, that's a minuscule part of this. And I don't want to, if people want to do veterinary, I'm all for it. It opens up your doors exponentially, and I advocate for it. But if you're at a point where you're out of university, you're in your career, don't think about going back to veterinary school, and and it probably won't anyway. But that means you can still get actively involved in these sectors. In this sector, and even if you're involved in an NGO that focused on the finances and the legal issues, lawyers too, you can still, as part of those NGOs, go to places like these, on a consultancy basis as well. You become part of the team on the ground within these big NGOs. They want, every now and again, they need a volunteer team, and they often send some of their own people out there. Even if you're a scientist but not a vet or a doctor, and you're a scientist, there's research opportunities in these environments as well, going out and looking at the relationship between humans and the wildlife, or plastic pollution and things like this.
Anyone who's interested in this can even look at volunteer jobs, let's say on a part-time basis, to see if they're interested to learn. Can be remote as well, sitting at home right now, research jobs, helping with accounting, helping with legal documents. Like you're saying, there's so many different ways to get involved.
There's so many NGOs, small ones as well, or sort of organizations that are looking for advice, on a voluntary basis for people in different industries. But if you're at a point where you're really worried about the next step, you want to make that jump, because you've lost passion in work and you've got passion elsewhere. How I manage this, like you said, is I set myself, I said, okay, I need to plan the next stage, but I'm going to do an increment, and small little increments, and say, okay, let's plan 6 months at a time. So I planned the 6 months. I didn't have a plan necessarily for what would happen after that. but I know that I've got here until that point full, and I can figure the rest out as I slowly go along. And I just did it in sort of small little increments so that the prospect wasn't as scary. So if I did that 6 months and I realized this was not for me, I could come back to the UK and I could go back into practice. That's fine. You know, I had that 6 months out. It was a great experience. Great.
Absolutely.
So every single bit of volunteer work, even if it's on a small basis, charity work, even on a small basis, or extended voluntary period, 4, 5, 6 months or less, it's still it's experience backing you up. It gives you that credibility to then, if you enjoyed it, you can say, I've got this. I want to explore this profession. Who is looking for what opportunities are there?
Yeah.
Just keep backing yourself up with more experience. If after 6 months there wasn't another job going further than what I wanted, and there was a smaller position for 3 months somewhere else in the world, I'll take it. But I wanted to do it as long as I was sure I was wanting to do it.
Yeah.
Do that 3 months, and then at the end of that 3 months, I've got 2 voluntary positions backing me up, filled with exposure and experience, and you jump to the next stage. So I think the opportunity to do that in my mid to late 20s was probably the best time to do it, because if it was a terrible mistake, I didn't sacrifice anything.
Like there's a lot less dependency on you at that point in time. Responsibility is yours and your own as of now, within reason. Obviously.
Within reason, everything's within reason. But yeah, I think the steps, as soon as you take that first step, it's that all that pressure sort of just dropped, and then you opened your mind a little bit more, about what I could do with it.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, and it's a scary feeling, but it's mixed with this odd little bit of excitement.
Yeah.
Meaning that the excitement's enough, the adrenaline, suddenly you feel that, motivation a little bit once you've made that step. And as soon as you've got past that bit, the scary part just sort of subsides, and you're then rejuvenated with that motivation. That's how I felt. I mean, a lot of people are different, but I had that gut feeling of doing it, and I had the push. Had the drive, and yeah.
And you backed yourself, man. That's big as well. Like the way you talk about your confidence in your abilities, it's so important.
It is. I think there's this notion of people, especially like you say, after university, you've done 2 or 3 years in the industry, of still feeling small.
Yeah.
And you are to a point. There's loads more experience to gain, but you also have to be confident in the fact that, hang on a sec, you know what you're talking about. There's still people who know more, always, so you want to learn from them, but don't feel like you're permanently in an industry that you're inferior. It's really it's very dependent on different industries, I understand, so it's difficult advice to give, but what I'm trying to say is accept your limitations, but realize your strengths.
For sure. And there's always going to be that one voice that tells you you're not good enough.
What is usually your own voice.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You need to be able to deal with that. Like, definitely you need to have tools, because you cannot be accepting that on a day-to-day basis. Otherwise, you just won't be able to take the next step. Like, how are you going to take the next risk and reap the reward of that risk if you're second guessing yourself all the time? In some cases, it's good because it forces you to evaluate things, which you should. But you need to be able to recognize when that voice in your head is right and when that voice in your head is wrong. And it usually is wrong, because you can educate yourself, you can develop a support system, you can do what you need to do to get the job done. Like, look at you in the Galapagos Islands dealing with a virus breakout.
Yeah, I think it's also really important to have the support behind you to be able to do that, whether it's from your current boss who says, yeah, look, maybe there's a job for you if it doesn't work out, or it's from your siblings or from your parents, and so having that, talking to them about what you want to do, is yeah, my parents have been very supportive of me, which has allowed me to take that next step. So I can't
That's so important. Yeah.
yeah, if without that support, it may take me a lot longer to make that step.
Absolutely.
So it's just finding that support too.
So, I wanted to finish off with a couple of questions. One that I'm quite curious about. Given the state of news and media at this point in time, if I want to educate myself about your field and your world and the world of science and medicine and conservation, what kind of sources would I look to?
There's so many mediums now to do that, whether you're on social media, there's, I think the most important thing is if you're going down a social media route, for example, you basically do some research and look for the programs that are interesting, whether across the field, like you go down the Rhino Orphanage is a fantastic one. Then you look for other projects in Southeast Asia, and you go around, you have a read of what they're up to, and then follow sort of as well some famous naturalists and presenters, and more opportunities, more projects will start to show up, and then have a read into those. I mean, there's so much field at the moment for this. It doesn't take much to research and hear about it. And yeah, it's conservation is everywhere now.
Yeah.
And there's some huge organizations, UN, WWF, the World Veterinary Service is one as well. So just
Amazing.
and expand your reading material.
Yeah. I was hoping you could share something, and this can be like just generally something that's influenced you over time, maybe some piece of art or an artist or an album or a song or something that you can share that people can check out.
Yeah. I think music's very different. I'm very country, my music taste. Zac Brown Band I've always been a big fan of. But they haven't been around for since I was a kid. But I think the big influences are the very standard ones, like David Attenborough. He's always been a big feature in sort of our lives, and even more so now. And he's a huge motivator. But there's loads more individuals around who have been, beyond family, who I've looked up to. But you've caught me out now.
Fair. Man, this has been incredible. I did not expect for this to go on for this long, but it's been such a good chat, dude.
That's been great.
If anyone wants to find out a bit more about the clinic or the Galapagos, where can they check you out?
They can. We have our project Galapagos Animal Doctors on Instagram and Facebook. We're going to be starting updating people as things become more certain. People can always follow myself, Ben Howitt, as well. And if you'd like to get in touch via that medium about if I can help in any way possible, do feel free to contact me that way. We will have our website up and running hopefully next month.
Thank you so much. So much, bro.
So there you go. That was part 2 of my epic conversation with Ben. And in terms of takeaways, I can't put it better than Ben did, which is to accept your limitations, but to realize your strengths. Take some time to think about what that means for you. Take calculated risks. And by calculated, I mean build in buffers for yourself. You can try out different things at lower stakes, such as volunteering. Every industry or job needs hard skills like accounts, finance, legal, marketing, education, you name it. And now, if you don't know whom to speak to, if you want to try your hand out at wildlife conservation or environmental conservation, or if you have questions about them, you can reach out to Ben or myself. In the meantime, go check out Zach Brown Band and Planet Earth. It's insane. I'll be back soon with another guest on another episode of A Little Life. Thank you for listening.